Welcome back to One Soul Radio with Steve Hasenberg and Cali Alpert.
Welcome back, friends, to One Soul Radio here on Unity Online Radio. Today we are continuing our little mini series, Spiritual Self-Help Legends, and we are featuring Anita Moorjani, who's the best-selling author of Dying to Be Me, among many other books and lots of online presence, who chronicles her near-death experience in 2006 in her best-selling book, and really had a miraculous recovery, spontaneous healing almost, right? So we were just talking about how she, after 4 years of cancer and being ravaged and really knocking on death's door, did die, had a near-death experience, and on the other side learned that, first of all, that she was one with everything, that all was timeless and spatially different than here on Earth, that she recognized why she had gotten sick and how to face her fears, that she was encouraged by her father that she had lost 10 years earlier to come back and live a more authentic life instead of going against the grain of her own self, which is most of the reason that she believes got her to that illness. And that all is actually cool on the other side of the veil and that we don't have anything to fear. So we've been talking about her story, and we've also been just sort of sharing our own knowledge of near-death experiences and all the research that's been documented over many, many moons, right? Not hundreds of years, but definitely.
Oh, the research probably
Yeah, how long's
beginning in
been going
about
on?
1979 or
Oh,
so,
okay, pretty recent.
starting with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross.
Yeah, oh, that's the other one who's one of our
Right.
favorites. So if you'd like to join the conversation, if you have any stories you'd like to share, questions you'd like to ask, fear around this topic that you'd like us to help you with, we'd love to hear from you. The number is 816-251-3555. So in terms of the lessons that she learned, because we had said that she really realized that everything had led her to that moment and that everything had been perfect. All her suffering, both emotionally, psychically, physically, up until that point had all been appropriate and had all been divinely written for her. I think the biggest lesson that I get out of her book and just her speaking, her teachings, is the part about not going against yourself. That it's so important to let your inner light shine, and that probably one of the biggest crimes we can commit against ourselves is not honoring, not being in alignment. I don't know if it was her or someone else that I heard recently say that it's more important to be yourself than it is to be positive.
I
I thought
like
that
that
was
very much.
right, so simple and so profound.
Mm-hmm.
But I think about like even my relationship with all these teachings at the age of 58 and a half, if I'm going to be exact, that I'm still really, really, even as I speak and lately in recent weeks, so keenly aware of all the ways that I'm not aligned with myself. As much as I thought I was really on top of it and in touch with it, there's so many subtle ways. There's so many times where you say yes and you mean no, where you spend time with someone who's not healthy, who depletes your energy, but ultimately you don't draw the boundaries. Anita talks a lot about how she was a quote unquote doormat or people pleaser because she thought that that's what was needed and required of her in order to fit into certain cultural mores, and also perhaps to be loved. That's a lot of the reason that we are people pleasers, right?
May
Yes,
I
you in the
talk
front row,
about may I talk about my people pleasing?
please.
Well, I'll only do it if you like me.
if I if I'm okay with it,
Yes.
okay, I'm very okay with it.
All right. So what she talked about was super important because when you're a people pleaser, which I have been, I am no longer basically. I started people pleasing very early, probably 5 or 6 years old, because of the chaos in my family, and I was trying to please everybody.
To keep the
What,
peace,
huh?
to keep the peace,
To
and to
keep the
navigate.
peace. But what happens is that you keep the peace and you try to appease other people, but you're not allowing yourself to speak truthfully, honestly, or authentically. And so a lifetime of that, just like for her, led me to, I know now and only in retrospect, to my 3 years of Epstein-Barr virus. And I was always over helping, over concerned about others' opinion of me, definitely a placater, and not speaking my authentic voice. So I relate to this 100%.
Yeah, I do too. I've been growing up the way you and I have not been shy about sharing the fact that our households had a lot of similarities in New Jersey, even though we didn't know each other then. Um, is it in the water in New Jersey? No, it's not. I love our home state. Um, but growing up, like with my mom, kind of, mental illness, borderline narcissistic personality disorder, codependent dad, really trained very early on that nothing was about me and my needs were not meant to be met. And it was only about whoever, that one person who ruled the roost and making sure that she was happy and cared for. And at least this is the storyline that was presented to us and lives to this day, by the way, doesn't change. And so one grows up feeling like, you don't have your own voice, that you don't matter, that you're invisible, that you're not seen. That's always been a really big one for me, not seen and not heard, which is why I do those two things really well, because I've overcompensated so deeply. My seeing and my hearing, both physically and metaphorically, go very, very deep. It's funny. Those are my hyper developed senses. I'm just realizing that now. Yeah, so it's very, very easy to get, to build those reflexes where you start just learning that, not that you're completely meaningless, but that it's not about you first and foremost, and you don't develop your own truths because your truths are about somebody else whose voice is louder. And it takes a lot of awareness and unpacking and therapy and meditation and crying and whatever tools you have, if you're lucky enough to even start to unpack it, to realize like how deep it goes. So even at this point in my life, I'm still realizing that in such deep ways, and where I still go against my grain and where I don't. So that's like her biggest, I have it even in our notes really with, asterisks and exclamation points, is that she says cancer, this is Anita's line, cancer came to save her life. She was killing herself before she had cancer.
Bingo.
Very powerful.
It's true. Listen, I have worked with so many cancer patients over the years. Fortunately, most haven't died, but some have died. And I could say across the board that the cancer created a vulnerability in them that sometimes forced them to look inside because they didn't want to. But every time we look inside, we find areas that need our help. We find areas that need healing. And so she was able, her understanding is absolutely perfect. Cancer did give her the opportunity to begin a journey of finding herself once again, dying to be me. It couldn't be a better title in the world.
Such a powerful title. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And again, we just want to reiterate too, for anybody listening that might be going through something like a major health crisis, or looking at the prospect of impending death, that at least according to our belief system, the research that we're citing, and Anita Moorjani's story, that there's a divine plan that's way bigger than us, and that there's no such thing as failure or losing a battle to a health crisis. It's just that some of us need to stay here for longer periods of time. Some of us need to stay here for shorter periods of time, because there's things that we need to learn, fix, control, get better, get to know a little bit better. like you say, this is just, you always talk about how everything wants to be known. Every shadowy part of us wants to be known. And so something like your body being ravaged by cancer is just an extreme version of staring you in
Which
the
is, in a
face.
sense, please know me,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm scaring you to death.
Yeah.
I don't want you to run away. I want you to run toward me, get to know me, find out why I'm creating all these cells. And maybe as you do that, we'll be able to heal together.
And we are healing one way or the other, whether we heal
Right?
back on earth or whether we heal in the spirit
Exactly.
afterworld, right?
The afterworld. I like that.
Right. I just combined a few. I
That
picked from
works.
column A and column B there. Um, let's see. So what else can we learn from Anita? The other analogy that she used, which I thought was beautiful, I've thought about this one too over the years, is she was also keenly aware that we are all inextricably connected and that it's a big tapestry of experience that we all
Mhm.
share. We humans, we're all the same. We're all having one common experience, but all of us is one single thread that's woven amongst many, many other threads. And that's what reflects, every person's life and every person's encounter. And that for her, the denial of her true self is what caused her cancer. She had low
Mhm.
self esteem. She was incapable of full expression.
Mhm.
And all her many fears brought her to that place. And fear gave her this gift, the suppressed power and the suppressing of her true power is what got her sick in her mind and what forced her to change.
So one thing we can say about suppression, when you suppress your voice, when you suppress your ideas, that suppression is also a constriction in your body. So the mind and the body are always together. So you're constricting your expression, constricting often the first thing that people notice, and my stomach hurts.
Mm-hmm.
My
Or
stomach
I have
hurts.
a lump in my throat.
I have a lump in my throat.
Mm-hmm.
My stomach hurts. I'm having a gut reaction. All of those are the way that the body is processing constraint and limitation. And limitation over long periods of time, unfortunately, creates disease.
Right. Dis-ease, being out of alignment
Dis-ease.
with yourself.
Right.
Yeah, I worry about that with myself sometimes. I mean, I try not to give it too much energy, but
Yeah.
it's part of the reason I'm so, um, the idea of waking up to all this is even louder for me now than it ever has been, is because I think about all the times I still do, have been going against myself in ways I wasn't even aware of, or when my body sometimes is taken over by tension because of something,
Mm-hmm.
some mind stream that I'm dealing with, or some
Mm-hmm.
narrative that I'm empowering, and then not feeling like I have the proper release for it. So at the very least, it's helpful to at least start being aware of when your body is speaking to you. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're starting to feel, I have a very dear friend who I would say every time she starts talking about something that's got a little bit of vulnerability or discomfort, she talks about how her stomach, she starts feeling nauseous or her heart,
Yep.
and then she stops herself. And I'm
Right.
always trying to encourage her, like, tell me more, but I also don't want to force her. Can't pull it out of somebody. It's, I just want to be supportive. But to me, it's so obvious that it's exactly what she needs to do is to move through those knots and those icky feelings to let it release. Um, so yeah, suppression. When else have we suppressed? I'm trying to think. There's so many times when it's interesting too. It's almost hard to get to be aware of it sometimes because on a lot of levels, a lot of people know me as very verbal. It could be a real, I don't know if loudmouth's the right expression, but not afraid of expressing myself.
Uh-huh.
Um, so this can come in subtle and loud ways. It could be people that you would be the least expecting of feeling this way or experiencing this. Um, comes in the form of the indoctrination that Don Miguel Ruiz always talks about. What we're
Uh-huh.
taught by our parents, our families of origin, our schools, our society, our churches. It's just sort of the natural way that we're born into this life, and it's not by anybody's fault that we start getting into all of these costumes that we're naturally be putting on, but ultimately we just have to be really careful that we're not wearing them for too long.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, we accept limitation.
Right.
Limitation is part of the journey of life. And so, within the context of that limitation, how do you also free yourself and express yourself? And that's really this movement between the limited nature of our humanity and our ego and the structures, and also the desire to be free, which is a remembrance of who we've always been. And there's this movement between the two. And unfortunately, the material part usually wins, at least for a while, because that's what we're used to. And the spiritual part, which is a higher frequency and more subtle, is a little bit more difficult to grasp and make constant. And so this is the dance that we do.
And also, to take that point a step further, we're just so conditioned to be small. There's some few great quotes I can't remember from all our favorite teachers about, I feel like Eckhart Tolle might have one of them. I can't remember now.
Well,
but
I think you're remembering Marianne Williamson's quote.
What is it?
Right?
Remember?
I don't know the quote in essence, but it has to do with our smallness and not buying into it.
Like, or our biggest fear is stepping into our power or capacity. It's something to that effect, whoever. Yeah. Yes. So that's another thing that Anita talks a lot about is, like why are we so familiar with our smallness? Like, why is that what our comfort, our default mechanism is for most of us? Even, she says that she, early on in her life, she knew she was destined for something big and great, but she just, and so she felt that tension between the way she was living. She was aware of the tension, but she didn't know how to get there, and she didn't have the comfort or the support or the tools to, to step into that. So one of the other things that she's doing a lot now, more in recent years, that she talked about, which I thought was really cool, is she's working a lot with life force energy and just more, just a bigger awareness of that. And I think encouraging other people to become aware of it too. So I know that when she came, first of all, when she came back from the other side, within a very small period of time, maybe 3 weeks, her cancer was basically gone. Her tumors had reduced to practically nothing. And she had a spontaneous healing, which is what she was told would happen. And, I'm sure, again, doctors in the medical community had attributed it to the chemo she had finally decided to have and all kinds of scientific reasons that they wanted to explain it. And God bless, that's fine. But I know that also she had a hard time kind of reintegrating because now she had this very, very vast and expansive awareness. And how do you come back and go to work the next day or whatever, and even have a language for that?
You betcha.
So certainly now she does, and she's found her comfort. But she talks about how the analogy was, imagine that you are not sighted, that you're blind, and then somebody tries to describe what the color of the sky is, or what a rainbow looks like, or what it's like to get off an elevator, because you have such a different, I don't even want to say it's a limitation, but a limitation in terms of not having one of your senses. And then suddenly you're woken up to, you have your sight overnight, and you have no frame of reference for what to do with that. So that's sort of what, how she explains what happened to her. And what she's starting to do now is really get more keenly aware of, she talks about like the threads of vibrant light and what she saw, we beings to be made up of as these highly vibrational essences of energy, and how everything's energy. We just don't see it again because we're used to either living in lower vibrations or not seeing it clearly. But that's something now she walks into a room and she can just, you can feel it with people, right? People either lift you up or they bring you down. They either feel like a light bulb has walked into the room, they feel like the lights have gone off. And so if you start to become more sensitive to that in your surroundings, it's a great way to kind of start more actively, proactively shifting into alignment, and what she's encouraging all of us to do. So she she just poses very simple questions like, how do you feel when you're with this person or in the situation? Do you feel like you're being filled up and your cell phone's being plugged in and your power's increasing, or that your battery's being depleted? Do you feel lightened or do you feel like dimmed? And it's such a great way to start gauging things. But then the key is to figure out how you learn to charge your own batteries, because you can't always extricate yourself from those circumstances, or dump that person in your life, or not go to work the next day, or get rid of your mother-in-law.
And to be fair about it, we're often put in situations with difficult bosses, difficult mothers, difficult mother-in-laws, difficult people.
Mm-hmm.
That is karmic. Doesn't mean we're supposed to stay with them
or like it
or relish the experience, but we're probably being asked to learn from it. So it's important not to run too quickly if you're having a bad feeling, but to be able to assess what the feeling is coming from, and whether it's from the other person. This happens in relationships all the time. Well, it's you. If it weren't for you, I'd be fine. It's so important to look at yourself, where you're being hooked, what your fears are, what you're being asked to learn, what you can work on, how you can evolve. And so that's important as well. Just wanted to throw that in.
Yeah, it is. And it is important. So it's also, she talks a lot about how the key is knowing that, that taking care of yourself is not selfish, and that having boundaries is, you got to keep your own cup full first if you're going to be there for other people. So you have to find your own way of charging your battery so that you're not constantly being depleted if you can't completely remove yourself from that situation. Right. And like you said, to recognize that it's there for your greater learning, and to mirror something, and to catalyze you to pay attention to something that perhaps you haven't paid attention to before, right? So with that, let's offer some of our action steps. We haven't talked about our out-of-body experiences and our psychedelic experiences and visits from our loved ones from the other side, and all these things that you and I have experienced. But most importantly, we want to offer some takeaways that we hope can help our dear listeners. So these are our suggestions for today. Number one is, notice when you're going against yourself. Do you say yes when you mean no? Do you spend time with people who deplete you? Are you going against your grain at work? How's your piece of the pie being split up? Are you bringing yourself more joy and alignment than not? Just start to notice that. And then second, notice what actions and people dim you versus brighten you. So there's kind of, these have a lot of overlap, and you might even want to write it down, just because it helps to create a little bit more mindfulness around it. Who is it that lights you up and makes you feel full and puts a smile on your face and makes you feel at ease? Who doesn't? What situations do the same? And then thirdly, learn to love yourself, which is such a cliche. It's such an overused term, but it's so important. It's the most important thing. Write a list. Have a little fun. Have a little love affair with yourself. Write a list of what you love most about yourself and keep adding to it. It's a good way, and you can read it every day. Take a look at it and just, sort of sit with some of the things you want to celebrate yourself.
That's good.
Yeah.
I have this little assignment for most of my clients. Mm-hmm. To write a list of 20, they have 25 things that they love about themselves or they're passionate about. And then they cut it up so they're like little fortunes. And they put those fortunes in a beautiful bowl. And each day they pick one out and they act as if it were true. At the end of the day, they put it back in. They do it for 6 weeks because it takes 6 weeks to create a new habit.
I love that. So beautiful. And it could be fun.
It's so fun. People love doing it.
For my 50th birthday, as part of my weekend away with friends that came in from out of town and all kinds of lovely surprises, my sister and my mother bought all those these little baby white, almost like just little pieces of paper, kind of they almost look like those little price tag pieces of paper. And they wrote all these adjectives about what they thought of me. And then they hung it in the hotel room where I was staying before I got there. It's a good one, right? But it was so beautiful just to see, we do that for other people and other people do it for us, hopefully. But do we do it for ourselves? Do we treat ourselves the way we would our best friend in all kinds of situations? That's really ultimately the bottom line, like probably number one takeaway, number one lesson from all of this, right?
And that's what the Buddha said. Be a
Right.
good friend to yourself.
Right. And it's for whatever reason, the one that eludes us the most. We're really
It
good at
does.
not doing that, even if we know intellectually it's a whole other thing to sit with it and just try to really get
So
in,
true.
embody that.
Right.
So to repeat our action steps of today, just start to notice when you're going against yourself in all the little ways. Maybe you're being too polite at the dinner table. Maybe you want to send your meal back and you don't. I'm just making up silly examples, but these are all examples. Do you say yes when you mean no? Do you spend time with people who deplete you? Just start to, just start to kind of pay attention. Notice what actions and people dim your light and brighten your light. And then finally learn to love yourself by writing a list of what you love most about yourself and keep adding to it and read it every day, or do Steve's exercise about cutting little pieces of paper and acting as if until it ultimately becomes reality. So we want to thank everybody for joining us. We have some juicy shows coming up. Do you want to tease them real quickly? We have like a few seconds.
Yes, we're going to Self-Realization Fellowship in March, and we're going to do a show from there.
We're going to, and some other treats that are coming, but we'll tease those next time. So we want to thank everybody for joining us and have a good week.